Should I wait until 60? This is the question we get all the time when working with individuals looking to retire soon. And over my many years of retirement planning, I've found that the majority of clients could have retired years earlier if they simply followed the advice that I'm about to share with you in this video. And that's exactly why I'm making this video today, to show you why, for many people, retirement is closer than they think. Let's get right into it. Some of the core problems when it comes to people waiting too long to retire are, first off, our culture and maybe even the financial industry inspires an idea of a universal retirement age of 65. And that makes anyone else considering earlier retirement feel irresponsible. Then it can be easy for financial advisors to focus solely on portfolio size while minimizing when enough is truly enough. And successful professionals who have worked all their lives in their career, they were never really shown how to calculate their actual retirement needs rather than their arbitrary account balances. If we're going to see things more accurately, so we might identify if it's truly okay to retire early, then we need to fix some underlying beliefs that can keep people over the age of 59 from actually retiring early. And I think it boils down to 3 or 4 beliefs. Belief number 1, your retirement account must hit a specific magic number before it's safe to retire. Belief number 2, the traditional retirement age of 65 means that leaving work earlier is risky. And this is partially fueled by the fact that Medicare doesn't begin until you turn 65. 3, the market needs to be at an all-time high before you can consider retiring. More on this in a second. 4, everyone else your age is still working. Means that you're taking a bigger risk than they are because they're working longer than you. Or another angle on this line of thinking is that pride comes before a fall sort of thing. And by retiring earlier than your colleagues, you might fail at retirement and get embarrassed. I know it sounds irrational, but if these walls could talk, those are the confessions from people just like you. Leave a comment if that example triggered a reason in your mind that maybe is keeping you from an early retirement. It always makes for good conversation and it might help somebody else. And as a quick aside note, one of the biggest problems that I've realized in this YouTube space is that, as with most content, whether it be tax planning, retirement savings, or Social Security, the advice is always pretty generalized. The main issue with this is that it leads to fear-based retirement planning, where you make irrational decisions about your retirement simply out of fear, when in reality, taking a step back, getting personalized advice is what you need to do. And even though videos like this one are great for understanding retirement threats and opportunities, what's most important is having a clear plan that's specific to you and your accounts and your situation. That's exactly why we offer to speak with you at no cost to discuss what it might take for you to optimize your plan for your eventual retirement. I'll put a link in the description if you want to schedule a call. We'd be happy to meet you. Okay, so back to the video. So underlying beliefs lead some people to losing years of summer without work. And if we're going to be fearful about anything, let it be that. I mentioned waiting for the perfect market conditions earlier, and we hear this quite often. And you can prove how irrational that metric is by asking the next question, which is, what do you do when the market drops and you're a few years into retirement? The answer is you stay retired. So obviously, you have to get rid of that underlying fear that the market has to be at an all-time high. And what about people chasing the ideal and arbitrary account balance? It can end up leading people to work an extra 5 years just to feel safe. And I've covered this in other videos, reasons why you want to be careful about thinking about that perfect number. And if you're comparing yourself to your colleagues who are still working, you might be trading irreplaceable healthy years for money that you're never going to get to spend. And I get it. It's hard to stay in your own lane and not compare ourselves to others. It's how we've survived and gotten to the point in life where we don't need to work full time, and maybe we can afford to have more time for ourselves. And to be fair, many people cannot afford to retire early, and working those extra years makes all the difference. But once we get past the limiting beliefs, we can ask the question about whether we can truly afford to retire early or not. And that's exactly what happened when we talked with James. He realized that he had these underlying beliefs. But then he got past them and he explored what an early retirement would actually look like for him. James wasn't sure if he could retire at 62 or if he should wait until he was 65. He's this pretty smart guy. He went out and got his own retirement software and he modeled a few different versions of retirement, but he wasn't sure which version of the truth to believe. And as a result, he decided to keep working because better safe than sorry, right? But when we challenged those beliefs, it changed how he felt about retiring early. And I think a big part of it was that he had these what ifs going on in his mind. What if the software is wrong? What if the market drops and it doesn't recover for the next 10 years? What if I really needed that extra money I could save by working longer? And here's one. Who am I to splurge on private healthcare for a few years until I turn 65? But the light bulb went on when he finally realized that the perfect number wasn't as important as he thought because his spending is going to change as he progresses throughout the retirement years. Waiting for ideal market conditions didn't matter because he could learn to use a strategy that can more accurately measure his spending versus market volatility in retirement. And that this idea of you and your colleagues waiting until 65 to retire, though helpful, was just a false construct, and that he could stop comparing himself to other people. Other people had not made the same choices that James had made earlier in life. He had been a pretty good saver and he had nice things, but he didn't buy the most expensive car and house throughout his life. James realized that he was closer to retirement than he thought, and that's in part because he did look at the math, but he ditched some of the archaic thinking that has previously helped people in the past. So here's what happened. Just as with any planning situation, he had a holistic view. He had all of his financial information in one place. He knew his income sources, his retirement accounts, and his investments were all there. He knew what his expenses were going to be and all his other financial goals. In the previous models that he had ran, it looked very much the same, but there were three key differences. And those three key differences helped James to feel like his plan was more accurate, more sophisticated, and at the same time, simple enough to follow because it focused on how much he could afford to spend each month without the fear of running out of money. So what could help him to believe this plan over the previous models that he had ran and be more sophisticated and simple at the same time? The first of the three differences were retirement expenses were more accurate. Rather than saying $120,000 in income for life, he was planning on spending more money earlier in retirement and less money as time went on. The second difference was, and this is going to sound nerdy, regime-based Monte Carlo is more believable and believed to be more accurate because it considers current and near-term market conditions as a reality, whereas traditional Monte Carlo uses averages throughout the entire 25 and 30-year periods. If you don't know what this means, don't worry about it. But if you're like James and you've modeled your own retirement plans, almost every retail software out there uses traditional Monte Carlo because it's easier. And the third and probably the biggest key difference is we're not using a probability dial as a focal point. So let me explain this one. The probability dial is part of the Monte Carlo testing that you see pretty much common in every financial plan. It's a useful tool, but it can communicate poorly when it comes to feeling like you're ready to retire or not. And the reason for this is that people try to get it to say 100% all the time during their retirement. And I know 100% sounds like a good thing, but it's really not in reality because it's super over cautious. And I'm a believer in being conservative in estimates, especially for retirement. I have other videos where I break down the problems with 100% probability in great detail, but consider this one point. If you have a 100% successful dial, you either die super rich or you worked more years and you saved more money than you had to. Rather than using the probability dial to model his retirement, he used risk-based guardrails. And risk-based guardrails uses the Monte Carlo dial behind the scenes. But James never sees that. Instead, James has an upper and a lower guardrail linked to his retirement savings. And those guardrails help him to know that an 80% successful plan can be okay as long as, in the worst case scenario, he's willing to make an adjustment to his spending. A modest adjustment to spending can preserve any portfolio in retirement, And James got to explore what those potential adjustments might look like, and he ended up feeling good about his plan because it was very manageable. And it was better than working extra years as in his previous plan. So now if you want to learn more about guardrails, we actually made another video a few weeks ago that goes over it in much more detail. You can click on the icon here to watch it. It was important for James, just as it's important for everybody, to know that their basic retirement expenses are going to be met no matter what happens in the market. And with risk-based guardrails, he had that plus more because he knows when it's okay to spend more. He knows that his guardrails are monitoring his portfolio each month and answering the question that really matters to anyone preparing to enjoy retirement. Am I okay to spend what I'm spending each and every month? The guardrails are giving him a clear signal for when his steady monthly income can increase or if they need to temporarily decrease as a sort of safety net so that the big picture goals can stay on track. Now that you know why we need to stop waiting to retire, you need to understand this one thing. This advice only shows you part of the picture. Many successful retirees weren't the richest or had the best savings plan. They simply had the best strategy. And that comes down to getting personalized advice instead of following general advice online. And after years in the retirement planning space, I've seen that personalized advice is truly the one thing that makes for a successful retirement. If you want us to analyze your retirement plan and show you how to better protect and strategize for your retirement, click the first link in the description and you can book a complimentary call. I'll see you in the next one.